Skuluk Mahamudra. We're following this text, and we saw the basic structure of the text here. And so far we've looked at the first section, the entering into the composition, the Panchen Lama, Panchen Losam Chigi Gelsen begins with paying homage to Mahamudra itself and paying homage to his teacher who introduced him to Mahamudra. And then he makes this promise to compose the text to enable him to finish the text. And now we're looking at the preliminaries, the foundation practices that are the foundation for the Mahamudra practice. And then in the actual practice later today, this afternoon, we're going to look at briefly touch on the Tantra level of practice. And then the main part of the text, of course, is looking at the Sutra level of practice. And so then tomorrow we're going to look at the Shamatha part of that, and then next year the Vipassana section, together with the post-meditation. And so this is really the core of the Sutra Mahamudras, the Shamatha Vipassana. So Vipassana, of course, is to come to realize the nature of our mind, and the basis of that is Shamatha practice. Because if we want to come to realize the nature of our mind in the Vipassana practice, we need to practice shamatha. We need to cultivate a calm, clear and focused mind. So the shamatha practice is simply to develop our attention skills, our concentration skills. And generally in this practice, two qualities we're trying to cultivate: stability and clarity. Stability means to be able to focus on an object without becoming distracted. But also we want to be able to focus on that object in a very clear way. So the second quality of clarity. So stability and clarity. But I always add a third quality to this practice that normally you don't see so much about in the text. And that is relaxation. Because the reality is that in our modern world we lead very hectic, fast-paced lives, a lot of agitation, a lot of stress, a lot of stimulus. Our minds are very chaotic. And so what we do whenever we want to focus on anything or task, what our natural habit is, we tense. Because if we don't tense, we feel like we're going to get carried away. So we tense to concentrate. And if we only concentrate for a short time, that can sort of work. But we know from our own experience, if we focus on something with a lot of tension for a longer period of time, we become completely exhausted and often become very agitated. So this is not a sustainable way of focus. That if we want to focus, the first thing we need to do is have the basis of relaxation. A relaxed body, a relaxed mind. So that's what I'd like to do now, is a short meditation, shamatha practice, of particularly paying attention to relaxing the body, relaxing the mind. And one good practice that normally is done to help relax the body and the mind is to focus on the sensations of the breath throughout the body, what's called the full body breath practice. So that's a very good practice for helping to relax the body and mind. What I'd like to do now is another variation of the breath practice, which is particularly suitable for Mahamudra practice. And that is, a little bit like we did in the last meditation, is to focus on the rhythm of the breath. Just noticing the rhythm of your breath. Again, we're not trying to change our breath in any way. We're not trying to make it rhythmic or deep or subtle or anything. All we're doing is noticing the rhythm of our breath. Noticing if we're breathing very fast or slow, deep or shallow, rough or smooth, regular, irregular. Just noticing what is happening in the rhythm of our breath. And that also is particularly good for working with relaxation. So let's do that practice now to start a little bit of shamatha practice, particularly establishing a basis of relaxation. We begin by preparing the body, setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. A vigilant posture is to keep the back nice and straight. And at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And then preparing the mind, setting it into a state of ease and relaxation. So not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future, simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply become aware of the rhythm of the breath. Without trying to modify it in any way. and maintain an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the rhythm of the breath. And if you get distracted from the breath, no need to get frustrated or upset. In fact, be happy that you've noticed you've become distracted. And the very first thing to do is simply relax. And then release the distraction. And very gently return to focusing on the rhythm of the breath without clamping down more forcefully. So relax, release, and return each time you become distracted. Simply keep coming back to the breath again and again, patiently and happily. So let's go back and continue where we left off in the text. So we're in the preliminaries part, the foundation practices for Mahamudra. And in the first paragraph there, halfway down page 1, Panchen Lama said, in order to have a doorway for entering in the Dharma and a central pillar for Mahayana, sincerely go for refuge and generate bodhicitta, without these being merely words from your mouth. So again, Mahamudra, of course, is within the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, of course, the goal is enlightenment. And so the door of entry into the Mahayana path, of course, is bodhicitta, then the aspiration for enlightenment. But the door of entry into Dharma, into Buddhist practice in general, of course, is refuge, when we have faith and confidence in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So therefore, to really cultivate that sincere going for refuge and generating the bodhicitta at the beginning of our practices. And so we saw then in the last handout at the back, the prayers for meditation, that often we find this in particularly Tibetan Buddhism, is that at the beginning of any meditation practice, we have a number of steps to go through as the preliminaries or the preparation for meditation. And usually the first thing we see is this going for refuge and generate bodhicitta. And it's often recommended we do that 3 times to really develop that sincere refuge and bodhicitta. But to help us from it just being merely words from our mouth, what we have preceding that here is these 4 thoughts, which are often called the 4 common preliminaries, meaning that they're preliminaries in common to all systems of practice, whether we're talking Mahayana or Theravada, that these 4 thoughts, if we reflect on them, they will really be an effective basis for all forms of practice. And so what we've seen so far is the first 2 is precious human life and death and impermanence. To really appreciate we've got this precious human life with lots of opportunities. And the second one, of course, is to understand that it's not going to last forever. So let's take advantage of it while we have it. So then we have 2 more of the common preliminaries, and that is by these 2 will enable us to really appreciate that we've got a life full of opportunity and we want to take advantage of it now, while we still got that. But how can we make our life meaningful? And so therefore the first step is the next reflection. And that is the reflection on karma, which is, of course, the Buddhist theory of cause and effect. It's the Buddhist theory of how our actions lead to our experiences. And through reflecting on this, we can appreciate that if we engage in harmful, non-virtuous behaviour, that will lead to suffering, and that if we engage in virtuous, wholesome behaviour, that will lead to more happiness, more happy experiences. So therefore, by reflecting on this, we would then adopt an ethical lifestyle. And so ethical lifestyle, or ethics, of course, is the foundation of all Buddhist traditions. So then this would help us to establish that basis. Now, we said briefly that the root cause of our suffering is our mental afflictions and our distorted view of reality. So the question is, how does our distorted view of reality lead to attachment, aversion, jealousy, anger, craving, and so forth? And how does that lead to suffering? That process, which actually is described in one of your charts, this chart here, Suffering and Its Causes, we'll be looking at that in some detail as part of the Vipassana practice, so that's going to come next year. So, having established that, we have a basis of ethics, but then of course, even if we're ethical, we're still stuck in this cycle of existence called samsara, and we're still usually looking for happiness and source of suffering out there. So to help us turn our attention inwards more, there's the 4th reflection. So again, if we look in this verse, these 4 lines here, the third one relating to karma, it says, the results of my virtuous and non-virtuous actions will without fail ripen within me. So again, by reflecting on that, that will hopefully motivate us to adopt an ethical lifestyle, avoiding harmful behaviour, and help us to engage in virtuous behaviour. And then the 4th line says, and since there is no genuine happiness to be found within the abodes of samsara. So samsara is a Sanskrit word, and we can divide that into 2. Sam is a prefix which means thoroughly or fully. And sara is coming from the root sir, which means to go. So samsara is to thoroughly go, means to go round and round and round and round. And so samsara is often translated into English as cyclic existence, that we are stuck in this state we find ourselves in now, life after life. We're continually cycling in that state. And that's called samsara. So samsara is not a place. This is not samsara. Samsara is a state of mind. And so that's why it talks here about the abodes of samsara, is the places that we live in due to our mind of this mind we have. Because if our mind is contaminated by the mental afflictions and distorted view of reality, we're stuck in samsara. When we eliminate those contaminations, when we eliminate the mental afflictions and distorted view, we are in nirvana. So nirvana is not a place, it's a state of mind. So whether we're in samsara or nirvana depends on our mind. Is it contaminated by mental afflictions, or have we purified the mind of the mental afflictions? So here, the 4th one, it says again, there is no genuine happiness to be found within the abodes of samsara. So then we can look at what we mean by genuine happiness. We can talk about 2 types of happiness, temporal happiness or genuine happiness. Temporal happiness is simply another name for our pleasurable experiences. So, of course, our pleasurable experiences are what's called a stimulus-based happiness. We have a stimulus, we have a pleasant experience. So therefore, by its nature, it's temporary or transient, which means that when the stimulus finishes, pleasant experience finishes. And therefore, by its nature, it's unreliable, because we can't just have a pleasant experience whenever we want one. They require a certain stimulus. No stimulus, no pleasant experience. And if we look closely